This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Get a whole month free at Mubi.com/ERZaid. And stick around because I have a lot to say and I have a lot of recommendations. Sit tight. I was in high school the first time I saw a Gregg Araki film. I often think that had I been exposed to his movies earlier or later in life, my appreciation for and understanding of his worlds would have been totally different. In the throes of teen angst and would-be rebellion, angry and confused, Araki's films filled with apocalypses really spoke to me. As much as I imagined no longer existing to the world or the world no longer existing to me, I also wanted to do as much as possible. I wanted to live and I wanted to see, and I wanted all of the world in the palm of my hand. Life sucks, I thought, but maybe living isn't so bad. And in the worlds invented by Gregg Araki, I saw that philosophy continually and vividly brought to life.
Let me tell you what the problem with the stupid fucking world is. All the stupid people are breeding like mad, having tons and tons of kids, while the cool people aren't having any. So the population just keeps getting stupider and stupider. I mean, it's no wonder the whole world's going down the toilet.
Nowhere opens with the declaration that the city of Los Angeles is nowhere, and that all who live there are lost. The multitude of characters and the sometimes otherworldly situations they find themselves in characterize the city as a purgatory, the in-between of something and nothing, where all who wander are lost. In this wasteland devoid of morality or empathy dwells characters like Dark, who long for more, who long for that so out of reach something that escapes them. They want someone to hold them, or for something to have meaning. This sense of isolation and dread and clinging to hope comes up often in Araki's filmography, the feeling of which is perfectly summed up with a question posed in Totally Fucked Up.
Can this world really be as sad as it seems?
Critics and even admirers of Araki's have frequently deemed his films to be nihilistic. Characters who bemoan the world, who hurt others, who are hopeless in a place that is violent and bleak. There seems to be no belief in anything, but describing Araki's worlds as nihilistic is only characterizing one side of the coin. The bigger picture depicts a world of disillusionment, with characters who might be on the verge of nihilism or something like it, but who are still, whether they're aware of it or not, secretly hopeful and optimistic. In Totally Fucked Up, the character Steven is attempting to make a documentary about his friends, and he asks them individually what their thoughts are on love. This is Andy's answer.
It's like this lie we're brainwashed into believing from birth. It's all a load of bullshit propaganda.
Despite this, Andy, when presented with what looks to be a promising relationship, falls head over heels. You can tell from his interactions with his love interest that he isn't this nihilistic, dispirited person. He's happy for love to have found him, happy to be experiencing it. Deep down, Andy is a romantic. He's not so much nihilistic as he is disheartened by an existence that feels like a meaningless marathon of misery. I really think Andy only says love isn't real, because that's what he wants to believe, maybe even needs to believe, in order to survive alienation. You can only get through so many broken hearts before you have to tell yourself that it isn't you who's being broken, but that love has never been whole. Araki's films have a romantic tinge to them, a sort of blink and you'll miss it gentleness that's easy to overlook. With beheadings and alien takeovers and giant beetles, romance seems like it doesn't exist in these worlds. But Araki's films are, like the character of Andy, hopeful and romantic. Sure, these characters live in a world that is often nihilistic, brutal, and unforgiving, but they still maintain this desire for something more. They believe in love, even when they say they don't, and that only adds to the emotional core of every Araki film, that we still hold on to fairy tales, even when we don't get our happy ending. I think Araki said it best with this. He has a yearning quality for a pure connection with another person, and I think that's what makes the films ultimately kind of romantic, even if he's denied the happily ever after. There's a warmth and tenderness between the characters. That's what makes it so heartbreaking, because it's set in a world that is incredibly chaotic and hostile. This chaotic and hostile world is even more brutal and unrelenting for LGBTQ youth. In these films, it isn't only that the city of Los Angeles is damning for all, it's society's attitudes towards these youths that is highlighted. Throughout Totally Fucked Up, the group reads news articles about growing hate for their community, about the rise in hate crime against them, about the pride with which these people perpetuate this hate, and just as awful, the casual attitude toward this uptick in violence. In this movie and others like it, they are the only ones who care about the fact that they are constantly under threat and under siege. The violence and alienation prevalent in Araki's films is a direct representation of what it is to be queer in the world. His films, especially some of his first films, like The Living End and Totally Fucked Up, are iconic for many reasons, including the fact that these films were some of the first times audiences were presented with a story that was unapologetically gay. This wasn't latent, not the kind of story you'd have to really analyze to get to the subtext of. Same-sex couples kissed on screen openly and freely. They had sex, they had relationships, and these relationships ranged from the casual to the deeply romantic, and they weren't inherently tragic either. It really was revolutionary and, quite honestly, still is. The apocalyptic quality to Araki's films are representative of the isolation and anguish of the AIDS epidemic. Other themes are an extension of queer identity and the experiences that come with it. The Living End is about two disillusioned people, Luke and John. They're both HIV positive and they have absolutely had it with everyone's shit. When Luke kills a homophobic police officer, the two take off on a crime-riddled road trip, righting wrongs and falling in love. The film was released in 1992, during a time when HIV became the leading cause of death among men ages 25 to 44, during a time of a presidential election where campaigning elects viciously attacked the, quote, homosexual lifestyle, a time with fucking Paul Cameron. The world in these films is a reflection of the world Araki was living in. Because of the AIDS crisis and what was going on politically, it was very much like a war zone. A very dark time, a very angry time, and a time when people were agitated. It was impossible not to be agitated because as a young person in your 20s or 30s, you were just surrounded by constant death. Your time was very limited because of the simple fact that you were gay. It was a very intense period to live through, and I think the films really reflect that. In The Living End, Los Angeles is a lawless and loveless land with endless brutality and hopelessness. The fact that Luke and John are able to not only find each other, but to fall in love is just one example of that romantic tinge I was talking about, and the one that Greg spoke of here. Everything is fucked up, but life is still worth living and love is still worth having. It's hard to think that a crime-filled road movie would be hopeful during the AIDS epidemic, but The Living End became exactly that. It offered both the young and the old of LGBTQ communities a glimpse of something hopeful. Yeah, the world is shit, Araki says, but you don't have to be alone in it. Teen angst is also a driving force in the masterpiece triad of the teen apocalypse trilogy. The first time I ever saw my teen angst reflected on screen was when I watched Nowhere. Of course I'd seen teen films before that, the classics, the contemporaries, the underseen, but when I sat down to watch Nowhere, which follows aimless college kids getting through a violent and incomprehensible world, it was the first time I really felt seen. I didn't have to have those exact experiences or be in that exact place. It doesn't matter because what I'm talking about and what Gregg Araki depicts well is a feeling of the crushing weight of adolescence, of everything and everyone being such a mindfuck that attempting to find logic in its existence is a fruitless endeavor, of what it is to be young and clueless and yet expected to know and understand everything around you. Araki's expertise is that instead of relying on characters to reflect moods and states of being, he relies on the world. Instead of writing a person who represents discontent or disillusionment, he crafts worlds made up of that feeling, emotional wastelands. Araki is one filmmaker proven to be divisive amongst audiences and critics alike. Every now and then, he'll touch upon something that becomes universally appreciated, like his 2004 adaptation of Mysterious Skin, which is beautiful and exquisite. Other times, people either love his work or they hate it. Never is there an in-between. That's part of what makes him so daring to begin with. He does his own thing without a care for what may appease people more. That's what I've always aspired to with my films. They're not for everybody, and some are polarizing. I definitely have my fans and my detractors, but the people that do get my movies really get them. For me as an artist, that's like the most I could ever ask for. The director once described himself as a vessel of imagery. When he's writing scripts, the words and the images and the characters come to him. He is a prism, and the stories he develops are the light. He's given one image or one light, and from it he shows you everything that makes that one story, all the different light reflected for you to see it clearly. My favorite thing about Araki's work, and one quality that carries through everything he's created, no matter the genre, here's looking at you, smiley face, feels like a dream. The surrealism and dreaminess is so affecting that even when there is no elaborate set design, no checkered hotel rooms like in the Doom generation, or polka dot ensembles like in Nowhere, it's apparent that this world is not like the one we frequent. It's surrealistic and hyper-realistic, on the fringe of truth and of fiction, of consciousness and unconsciousness. The only other time I get this feeling of weightlessness, of comfortably floating within a space I don't understand, is when I listen to My Bloody Valentine. And that is extremely intentional. Gregg Araki's love for shoegaze music is apparent even if you're not paying attention to the soundtrack, though how you could manage to not hear it escapes me. But even if you're not paying attention, that dreaminess is a filter that enhances each and every one of his films. When I sit down for one of his works, I'm not going in with reality on my mind. I'm going in expecting to be exposed to things that bear no logic, that take me away without me having to leave my seat, but that also exposes me to the ups and downs of existentialism and existence. The genre of shoegaze was, funnily, dismissed when it first entered the scenes. Critics deemed it boring and effortless in a bad way. The name shoegaze was fully intended to be an insult. A genre of music that puts you to sleep is how people perceived it, characterized by steady beats, washed out reverb, droning, and all the makings of something ethereal. You don't listen to shoegaze. Shoegaze sort of just happens to you, overtaking you with emotion and plunging you deep into this unknowable world. Like Araki's films, shoegaze is just as much about attitude as it is about content, if not more. There is an inherent quality of emptiness, the music and the vocalists sort of wailing for an out from this void, and though it may sound sad or hopeless, the wailing itself is proof that someone is home, someone is listening. I find it amazing and endlessly impressive that Gregg Araki managed to visually and narratively characterize a genre of music, especially one as evasive as shoegaze. As much as isolation and hurt and romance, shoegaze is just as significant a character to his films. In those formative teenage years, that music really struck a chord with me. The British bands were more atmospheric and experimental, music that you respond to on a purely emotional level. I've always liked bands that do their own thing. It's a spirit I share in my filmmaking. Araki's worlds and the way he builds them are so divisive, perhaps in part due to the violence they contain. People are murdered and brutalized in every which way. However, the way he chooses to explore violence is more palatable than he gets credit for. It's never done exploitatively. The violence is not voyeuristic. In fact, all the violence in his works occur off-screen or in the dark, distorted so that it never feels gratuitous or there solely for shock value. Some might disagree with me on that last part, but hey, this is my video essay. Get your own? Assault also comes up a few times in his worlds, even before Mysterious Skin. Characters in the Doom generation and Nowhere fall victim to it. There's an obvious intention in both instances. Violence has a place in Araki's world. We're talking about characters who are discontent, disillusioned, and all but destroyed by the crushing melancholy that feels inescapable. These are people who are too pure for the chaos of this world, and the violence they experience further showcases that. They deserve more than what they're getting. This harshness drives the story forward. It encompasses everything you'll note in these films: the alienation, the anguish, and the faint desire to believe in nothing, because believing in something makes all this shit harder to face. But at the same time, if you stop believing in a place like this, what the hell do you have left? The atmosphere of Araki's films can be best described as a melodious blend between hyperrealism and surrealism. Regardless of the specifics on character or plot, these films are so memorable and can easily get under your skin because of their too accurate representations of real-life struggles. It's this world that shouldn't be real and yet is. It's kind of like being presented with a photo of yourself. It's different from the version you see when you look in the mirror. You recognize it, of course, but it's hard to wrap your brain around it being you. Cities, the most populated places in the world, tend to be the most alienating. In Araki's earlier works, the busyness of LA and its simultaneous detachment from humanity is frequently observed. You have these images of people walking around aimlessly, of general disdain or disregard for empathy and humanity, and in the middle of it, you have these gentle souls. These truly empathetic people who are drowning under all of this emptiness. There's a scene in Totally Fucked Up where Andy and Ian pass a homeless man on the sidewalk. It's Andy who stops because he wants to help, and Ian who would rather ignore the situation.
Don't you have like 50 cents or something?
No. Probably faking.
I don't care.
The use of surrealism fades in seamlessly with everything else going on, not bothering to explain it, which made it feel more authentic. In his films, angst and loss come in the form of monsters and aliens and apocalypses. Everything in films like Nowhere and The Doom Generation is leading up to an event unlike any other. In The Doom Generation, the characters pass by a sign that declares the end is coming. In Nowhere, Dark says this, and I still think it's one of the greatest lines ever. And this goes back to being gay and coming of age during a time that was so frightening, where death was all around you, where you feel like you're running out of time to do something great. There's this sense of, well, what's the point anyway? The use of surrealism, the alien abductions, and giant cockroaches brilliantly put visuals to that aggravating uncertainty and restlessness. Here is the thing you're running from. What especially stands out is the solidarity, though. It's a love letter to LGBTQ youth. There's hostility and brutality and things you can't put into words, but in the midst of that is friendship, love, and the reminder that although the world is brutal, you don't have to be alone. It's really fun to watch Now Apocalypse, Gregg Araki's self-described career retrospective in TV format, and see all these little things referencing his repertoire of memorable films. It's a sleek patchwork of everything him, and I love it. Even when I find myself unable or unwilling to watch certain Gregg Araki films, I must say I'm endlessly fascinated by the world he invents. Because that world is a place of the impossible and the possible, of unabashed and unexplained weirdness, monsters and aliens and cinematic apocalypses. It's a world that is violent and painful, hazy and hard to understand. I'm fascinated because, as warped as these worlds are, they're also the closest reflections of the real world I have seen on the screen. The best way to enjoy an Araki film also happens to be the easiest way to get through the difficulties of life. The real world is nonsensical, needlessly violent, sometimes beautiful, and always a headfuck. To get through it and appreciate it is to try not to make sense of its absurdities, to accept the flawed and the freakish without getting tripped up over the logic of their existence. In that way, Araki delivers the real world, angst and enchantment along with it, right to you. Just as the characters in his worlds are often left without answers or closure, the hands dealt from life often leave us confused or sitting in a pool of blood and flesh, watching, stunned, as an alien cockroach that was once a love interest escapes from our bedroom. That really happened in a Gregg Araki film. Like, seriously, if you haven't watched his movies, maybe get on that. Mubi is a curated streaming service, a place to watch beautiful, interesting, incredible cinema. Every day, Mubi premieres a new film. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected. It's like your own personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere. I've been using Mubi for about a year and a half. Yeah, that is Brenda Sykes as my profile pic. It started during the inception of the pandemic because I needed something to do with my time, and of course the thing I was most interested in was watching more movies. Not only have I been introduced to a lot of directors I hadn't been familiar with before, like Sylvia Chang, but with the selections on Mubi, I've had an easier time crossing films off my watch list, like Ahsoka 1 and 2. I figured if you clicked on this video, and I don't mean a video made by me, I mean a video specifically about Gregg Araki, you might be a person who really appreciates cinema. Just a thought. It's a service that really excites me. At the top of the homepage, you'll find Mubi's Movie of the Day. As of me recording this bit, the film of the day is Hotel New York. Oh, that's a good one. You can also make lists and write reviews. Speaking of lists, I came across one on here that's exclusively compiled of movies that have shoegaze soundtracks, and guess which director is here a total of 7 times. You know I can't let you go without some recs first. I made a little list of movies that are available on Mubi that I highly recommend, but I especially want to single out the following: The Legend of the Stardust Brothers. This movie is wild and hilarious and whimsical. It's a surrealist, maybe absurdist musical comedy about what happens after 2 people form a band and the rise and fall of fame they experience. It's a story we've seen before, but the way it's told is so bonkers and campy and just overall a good time that it feels completely different. Meeting the Man, James Baldwin in Paris. It's no secret that James Baldwin is one of my all-time favorite writers. I've read through each and every one of his books. Some of them I've even read multiple times. This documentary covering James Baldwin and his time in Paris is an engaging portrait of an intellectual, an artist, and a great human being. It's nice to see him in such a way, and after watching it, I wanted to re-immerse myself in his literature. Even if you're not a fan of James Baldwin, I still recommend it. Anyway, you can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/Yarzade. That is mubi.com/Yarzade for a whole month of great cinema for free. You won't regret it.